The Marvel Handbook, Episode A, 6, Ares, God of War, ARIEL, ARKON, and Alpha Centaurians.
Marvel Universe. The Avengers, Black Panther, Black Widow, Colossus and Cyclops, the Crimson Dynamo, Daredevil, Doctor Doom, Doctor Strange, the Fantastic Four, Galactus, Blue Strider, Motorcycle Hero, Hellcat, the Duck, the Human Torch, the Incredible Hulk, Bruce Banner, Invincible Girl, MODOK, Magneto, Mr. Fantastic, Prince of the Deep, Nightcrawler, Odin, Power Man and Iron Fist, Professor X, the Punisher, Big Jones, Sergeant Fury, the She-Hulk, Silver Surfer, Spider-Man, Spider-Woman, Storm from the X-Men, the Thing, Ben Grimm, the Mighty Thor, Stadium Man, Wolverine, the Marvel
Hello, this is Ryan Daly from the Fire and Water Podcast Network, here to talk about the Alpha Centaurians. This is one of the many tertiary alien species that wasn't notable enough to get a full-page entry in this issue. In fact, the Alpha Centaurians only get a quarter of a page, but I wanted to discuss them because I really like the story in which they debuted, which was Submariner issue 17 and 18. Physically, the Alpha Centaurians are humanoid with gray, scaly skin. Their heads, they have these kind of skin flaps or jowls coming from their nostrils around to their ears, and they have very pointed ears. To me, they kind of look like seals, except with the very pronounced ears. They are an amphibious aquatic species. Their homeworld's surface is covered by water, and they live in kind of feudal caste cultures. Despite this, they have mastered interstellar travel, which is a good thing because their planet, Alpha Centauri, was dying. The water was drying out, and they needed to re-wetten the planet? I don't know. To do this, they flew to Earth where they were going to use their advanced technology to siphon the water from Earth's oceans and deposit it back in Alpha Centauri, thereby saving their world while dooming ours. What stopped this nefarious plot from coming to be was the hubris of the Alpha Centaurians' chieftain, Dinor, who first appears calling himself Dinor the Stalker. He scouts the oceans of Earth where he discovers Namor the Submariner and Triton the Inhuman. He's fascinated that these two beings have deviated from their normal species traits to breathe on land and in water, and he wants to study them. So, after a big fight, Dinor has captured Namor and Triton, and he is going to make them watch the destruction of their world before he subjects them to all sorts of tests and dissections to figure out what's up with their strange physiology. The boys don't like that. Namor and Triton bust out and reverse the master weapon that siphons the water from Earth. It now sucks the last of the water from Alpha Centauri, destroying that world. What I have always loved is how the Alpha Centaurians react to this. They don't fly into an anguished rage and murder Namor and Triton. They don't declare war on Earth. Instead, they blame their leader, Dinor. They're like, "You arrogant fool, we had won. You didn't have to bring these guys on our ship. We could have taken their water and left." But it was Dinor's hubris and his ambition that overreached and brought about their destruction. So the Alpha Centaurians turn on him, and Namor and Triton are sent back to Earth as the aliens turn on their master and kill him. I thought that was hilarious. This story from Submariner is written by Roy Thomas and drawn by Maurice Severin. I have always liked it, in part because it made me a fan of Triton for the first time. Until a couple of years ago, Triton was really my least favorite of the Inhumans royal family. I just didn't find him that interesting and didn't really care for how Jack Kirby drew him. Once Triton started appearing in the Submariner comic, though, I saw how John Buscema and Maurice Severin drew him and how he interacted with Namor, and I liked him a whole lot more. Now he is one of my favorites of the Inhuman royal family. And the way he and Namor worked together to free themselves and to destroy this whole Alpha Centaurian culture was crazy and kind of awesome. So, yeah, the Alpha Centaurians are not the most memorable alien race in the Marvel Universe, but I like them because of how quickly and practically they turn on their leader, whose personal ambition totally screwed them over, and also because the story made me a bigger fan of the character Triton and his complicated camaraderie with the Submariner.
Thief! I know you're in there! Ah, crud. There you are! Did you think you could hide from me forever, little brother?
Oh, hey there, brother. What brings you to New York?
Hercules' brother? Which brother are you? Please be one of the nice ones.
I am Ares, Prince of War, Harbinger of Destruction, Bringer of Pain.
So, kinda not nice.
Go away, Ares!
Okay, Victor, you want to go ahead and start?
Yeah, okay. All right. Well, what is Megashine? What is that about? Well, Megashine is a podcast for queer people of color by queer people of color. I can't even say it.
Okay, start over.
All right. What is Megashine? Well, Megashine is a queer podcast featuring queer people of color talking about geeky and queer things. A lot of queer in there.
Yeah, we double up on the gay because we like it. And I'm Nick.
And I'm Victor.
And we can talk about anything from the Phoenix Saga to dating app to porn stars to video games, anything and everything.
Right.
And you can catch us. We're on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Episodes are bi-weekly. So, yeah, check us out, listen, rate us, like us, and follow us.
That's right.
I don't know if there's a lot of crossover between our two audiences, so why don't you go a little bit more into who you are as individuals?
Well, I'll start. I'm Nick, and I come from the Marvel, mainly from the cartoons and the video games. So I grew up watching X-Men, the animated universe, going on through watching a little bit of the X-Men evolution. I didn't much really get into Wolverine and the X-Men because I kind of felt like that show was trash. That's where I come in from.
And what about you, Victor?
Well, I've been a long-time comic book fan since I was a kid. Marvel hit me through Spider-Man Amazing Friends. From there, I just started, saving my little money and buying comics at the, local grocery store and really getting into the stories. My first Marvel comic was X-Men 248. I was kind of lost because a lot of things happened. X-Men were supposedly dead at that time. We were introduced to some different characters that later, as I went back to back issues, kind of got a better idea of them. So, I've been in it for a long time, since I was 13, and been in it ever since.
Do either of you have previous experience with the official handbook in the Marvel Universe, or is this sort of a new thing for y'all?
Oh, I do. That was something I used to collect. In fact, I remember there was a 1-900 number or something. It was a game that you had to play with Spider-Man where you can win the updated versions. And I did that, and my mom killed me because that was a big phone bill. But a whole bunch of those, and they were like detachable, like files almost. You can put them like in a binder.
You had the loose leaf ones then, the ones with they were mostly white backgrounds, and there was a turnaround of the character.
Yeah.
Okay, Master Edition.
Yeah.
I know the one. Yeah.
I bought them the old way, but then when the newer ways were in the 90s, I got those. And then they updated it again, and I also got but the graphic novel versions of those books as well.
Cool. Yeah, it's funny. Just on Twitter the other day, somebody was asking whoever played those phone games, and now I know somebody who actually did that.
Yeah, I did. I was that person.
You want to move on to Ares?
No, it's funny because I feel like this Ares became popular only because of Xena. That's my personal opinion. Because, Ares was such a popular character in that show. And then all of a sudden, we were seeing Ares. Now, we already had Hercules. And, in some ways, they're not the same at all. But, you kind of had a little bit of a Greek demigod very active in the Marvel universe, a little bit more than all the rest of them. So we got a little bit of a taste of that Hercules. But then later, we end up getting Ares. Ares is a very fascinating character. I know a lot of gay men like Ares. He's very...
Actually, if you could elaborate on that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, so he is this true masculine, bearish looking character in the comic. And so when we see him, we see this look of bad, something about this dark character, this, mysterious, he's been through things, he's a battle person, like he's all about the fight. He doesn't matter, he doesn't care whose team he's on or what's going on. He likes to be in a fight. And that's how he was depicted, that's how he looked. He was hairy, he had this huge muscles. He was just something that I remember a lot of.
Well, did he get much play in Incredible Hercules? Because I know there was a big thing for a while there when they did the alternate universe Hercules. He was in a relationship with Wolverine, and they really started to play up Hercules' bisexuality. And I'm wondering if that was a gateway, if Ares was popping up there, if maybe there was an association there that may have contributed. Yeah,
I think because he has that played a part that gave people a hint, this whole muscle bear thing about Hercules, but also the same with Ares. The way Ares was also drawn on in the comics. You just saw him as this, like, ooh, who's this guy? He could have been of any sexuality. That was never really something that was pushed. I think he had a daughter, but I don't think that was something that was pushed that he was like this super straight man. I think he was just something that had an appeal that everybody caught eyes on. His first appearance in 1966 with Thor, of course, but we didn't really get to see a lot of him until like around 2006. And it was interesting because he was considered an anti-hero. Now in DC, he is a full-on god. He's a villain of Wonder Woman, and we see him try to destroy the world many times, either through him or through his kids. This was a different type of version. I always felt like he was this worn-torn, like another version of Punisher almost, because he was just this brooding character. We also got to see a little bit more during the whole Civil War era, where they were really trying to figure out what's going to happen after this, and he was invited to join S.H.I.E.L.D. at that moment, just because of what was happening after the death, quote unquote, of Captain America. So it was very interesting to see how at that time he was brought in to be the muscle, be the fighter, and then later brought in to be a part of Norman Osborn's team, the Dark Avengers, which was also very interesting too. We didn't really get a lot out of Ares throughout the years in Marvel. Guess who he got to fight? Namor. I feel like everybody fights Namor in some form of fashion. They all
Namor got hands for everybody.
He does, because he's also arrogant. But we got to see a little bit more of how Ares how he would be as a hero when we saw him with the Avengers and what have you. But I think he was killed by Sentry, and Sentry was another Dark Phoenix-like character with Madden. When they were fighting, he basically split him apart. Okay, well, nice to know you, Ares.
I've only known Ares through actual Greek history, a little bit on the DC side, and then the God of War, the actual video game. So I didn't even know that Ares had this whole background with Marvel Comics. I kind of struggle with the fact that you're going to have a villain and then all of a sudden, fast forward, he's now an anti-hero. Sometimes I struggle with that. If he's a villain and he is just so consumed with fighting and war and that's what he loves, then maybe just leave him like that. But I don't know. I go back and forth with that sometimes.
Yeah. I think he was sort of an antagonist for Hercules. So it's not necessarily he was a full-on villain, but the guy who we were supposed to be rooting for, he fought, and therefore he's the villain by default. But I don't know that he ever did anything so overtly villainous that he couldn't come back from it and be an anti-hero. That's my ignorance. I wasn't a big Thor reader, so I can't say that there wasn't something he did that was like completely heinous. But he didn't get the kind of play like, say, a Loki would get, and that didn't stop Loki from being an anti-hero either.
Yeah.
True. That's true.
He's a god of war, so he did linger around for a little bit throughout the comics. And I know when Marvel went through this all new, all different Marvel, he did return. So he's around, but they're not really using him that much. He's just right now traveling the world with his friends, and he wants to go back to these fields. He was I think when he was supposedly dead, he was hanging out in these fields. But I know when they had the Secret Empire storyline, he was a part of the Champions of Europe, which was interesting. And if you remember the Secret Empire, I think that was when this whole thing about Captain being a Nazi or something like that, which I didn't really read all of that, but apparently along that storyline, he was with Captain Britain and Guillotine, which is an interesting name, and Excalibur. So he's around, but they're just not really using a lot of him in anything.
He seemed to kind of be Brian Michael Bendis' pet character, and once he had him ripped in half, he was done with him, and it doesn't seem like too many people have picked it up since then.
Yeah. It's interesting what happens when they don't know what to do with a character, so they'll just linger around, and they'll pop up in a comic somewhere like, what? Okay. It's just like, and how do you survive? As always, that's kind of the answer these days. So, I don't know. I like the Ares in DC. I'm sorry, Marvel folks. The Ares in DC has more of a character arc and situations that I appreciate. As you were saying, I don't know if they know what to do with him.
I don't like when Marvel does DC or DC does Marvel. I like them to really be separate and do their own thing. And DC, through Wonder Woman, has definitely embraced Ares as the villain, and also more so in recent years, Hercules. They've played around with him being a hero, but because he's so important to Wonder Woman's lore, and Wonder Woman is such a huge character at DC, it seems like they've leaned more towards allowing Hercules to be a villain of the DC universe. So for Ares and Hercules to be good guys at Marvel, that helps me because each company's doing their own thing with their characters. I kind of like giving them a face turn, I guess you'd call it in wrestling terms.
Yeah.
But I'm in agreement with you, Victor. If I had to choose between a portrayal of Ares versus Marvel or DC, I would have to go to DC, especially how he was portrayed in Justice League and Justice League Unlimited. I liked how conniving he was. He reminded me almost a little bit of Mystique in terms of his cunning.
Yeah.
The art is by Paul Smith. What do we think of the entry and look of the character?
It's very classic. This is the God of War. That's kind of look at the whole helmet and everything. This big muscly god. So he kind of had that feel that, that was attractive in so many different ways. To me, he's just the Greek god. That's a Greek god look right there.
Almost reminds me of something. What was Wolverine's friend that got the legacy virus? Was it Maverick?
Yeah.
It almost looks like something Maverick would wear when it's too hot. It doesn't scream Greek god to me. But I mean,
even with the helmet and everything?
No, not to me. But, different strokes for different folks.
Well, and he looked a lot different when they made him more of an anti-hero, too. Didn't they go with, like, long white hair and stuff?
Yeah, one of the pictures, he almost looks like the art by Ed McGuinness. Makes him look like Bane a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that. And I was thinking, I can see where you can see a little bit of Punisher because of wherever he was wearing the shirt or his battle gear.
His harness.
Yeah, you can see it pretty much his harness.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, it's funny because Ares looks like the quintessential 90s hero we used to see like in Image or, those type of comics. Just big for no reason, big axe, big male. Comes off like very interesting when you look at the look of Ares, especially as you look at the Chaos War, you look at some parts of Incredible Hercules. You just have that look of the 90s heroes.
He's even got a Liefeld sword with a big lumpy handle. Looks like a vinyl toy or something. It doesn't look like a proper handle.
There is one cover, and I think it's his graphic novel, that I do like. It's red, and I do like that cover. I like that look of him. There's a sense of loneliness to what it is to be a god of war, that you're always fighting. You really don't win. There's always a loss. So I've always liked that, because the way they make him look is you almost want to feel a little sorry for him.
Yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot of pathos there. I didn't appreciate that until you mentioned it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Ares.
Sprite, Colossus and Storm, take the main stairs.
You'll be sorry. Something about Siberiad bothers me.
You mean besides the fact that he's trapped us in the mansion? Colossus? Cyclops? Yoo-hoo!
Here I am, Sprite. Come on, I found Cyclops.
Lead on, Tin Man.
He's in here. Only you can save him.
Hang on, Cyclops! Hey, what's the big idea? Ow! What's this place made of?
Vibranium, my dear Sprite. A metal that can vibrate to block your atomic structure. In other words, I've grown accustomed to your phase.
What have you done?
Vibranium is also an excellent sonic wave conductor, as you're about to find out.
Somebody's playing their stereo too loud.
Kitty? Colossus did this to me. He tricked me into the room.
That means it was just a hologram of Nightcrawler.
Then maybe the Colossus that trapped me
wasn't the real Colossus.
Yay! I knew Peter Rasputin wouldn't pull such a rotten trick. Maybe a gentler approach will do the trick. I'll phase through.
So this is the 108th Sage, Inza, if you're going to use a proper name. And I'm a game designer / I guess role-playing game designer. Yep. In the middle of / halfway through / almost done with co-designing a board game we've been playing for 20 years. And about 6 years ago now, no, let's see, closer to 4 years, about 6 years ago now, we were looked at each other and we were like, wait a minute, this game is getting adjacent to where we could ever actually release it to the public and let other people buy it. So we okay, the next time we're going to do a version change, we're going to go ahead and make everything not for what's best for us, but what's best for a new person playing the game out of a box. And so we changed the game in a lot of ways we never thought we would, but it's so much better now. It's so much smoother and plays faster and it's a great game. So the game is called Battle Quest. Adventure Awaits is the subtitle once we realized we probably wanted to have a subtitle because Battle Quest is already at least 9 different things, including a type of Zelda special play style. I don't know, whatever. Anyway, the point is that it's a cooperative board game. It's role-playing without a game master, really, is what it is. A cooperative story-based tactical adventure is kind of the little tag we have on our board we put up at Dragon Con when we demo it. And so 2019 is going to be our 5th year demoing this game. And that first year, we didn't really know what to expect. product, and we were blown away, especially the kids. We play with 20 to 40-year-olds, we're not playing with kids, but all of a sudden, that first year, there were kids that teaching it to their parents, like halfway through the first game. Like, no, Mom, you're doing it wrong. Here's how the game works. And they were 100% right. One of the things we've done with this game is play it for 20 years. So we've refined the rules and got it really stupid complex, and then spent the next however many years kind of refining it from that and taking out all the complex stuff and making it super simple and super cool. And it's just a lot of fun.
Since you haven't done podcasting before, do you want to introduce yourself in terms of where you're coming from as a fan?
Good idea. I got into podcasts back in 2012, I think, when I was like, oh, I need some left-wing political news because I can't get that through the regular news sources. Oh, Chris Hayes, he's an awesome person. I'm going to see if Chris Hayes has a podcast. And that led me to this thing, Citizen Radio, which then led me to a couple of other podcasts. And I eventually started branching into TV podcasts when I saw the Fringe podcast by Golden Spiral Media up on one of the Vote for Podcast Awards kind of thing. I love Fringe. I'll check that out. And that led me to the whole world of TV podcasts. And then the Flash podcast had Shag on. And that's how I found out that they were actually good comic book podcasts. Because I'd actually looked into them when I first started getting into podcasts, but they were all about what was current. I didn't care about what was current. I wasn't buying comics by the issue anymore and hadn't for years. And so all of a sudden I find these people talking about who's who. It's sold already there. And then the Fire and Water Network, of course, started me spiraling between all these different other networks like Two True Freaks and, of course, Fortress of Baileytude and all that stuff. You led me to Warrior for Peace, the Wonder Woman podcast, which I really enjoy. So many podcasts I've listened to in the past, 7 years now. I'm always subscribed to more podcasts than I could possibly listen to. As far as comic books go, started reading comics when I was a wee child, and my first comic book I ever bought with my own money was Power Pack number 6. Then a little bit after that, when they crossed over with the X-Men, I started collecting X-Men too. And my brother had already been collecting Avengers and Fantastic Four. So those were our 4 main books, because we would, of course, read each other's books growing up. So, of course, I was a big Marvel kid, especially when I went to my cousin's house and tried to read her Superman comics. And they were just so juvenile, it felt like. Come to find out after I'd grown up and I'd actually started reading those Superman comics again and loving them, that, oh, wait, I was reading Marvel comics in the 80s, but she had Marvel comics from the early 70s because somebody had given it to her parents, and she just had a whole bunch of comics that she wasn't getting current comics. So I wasn't reading current Superman when I was like, oh, Superman's super lame when I was a kid. I was just reading the late 60s, early 70s stuff. So I was just 100% Marvel until my mom found out that Mary Jane Watson had posed for Playboy and other scandalous things and made us sell all of her comics. Although I was able to convince her to let me keep Power Pack. We went for years, the wilderness years, I think of it, without being able to read comics until I could all of a sudden start driving. And then I could start buying comics again. So I was pretty much just back into comics from that moment. Although as I was getting back into them, my friend was getting into them, and we were diving into the back issue bins, and we mainly focused on DC, actually, specifically the pre-Vertigo stuff. Oh my goodness, Doom Patrol and Shade the Changing Man. I was the collector of Doom Patrol, my friend collected Shade, and we of course read each other's comics. Invisibles and Sandman and all that stuff really helped reinvigorate my interest in comics as a teenager. And I started branching out into things like Comics Greatest World and the Ultraverse when they were Ground Zero, you don't have to jump into the crazy continuity, because I had really not gone back to Marvel since I had gotten back in comics, because all those years of continuity that I had missed were just what? I don't know. And then as I got into my college years, I had to stop buying comics for a while being poor. But when I got back in, I started actually dabbling both DC and Marvel, but pretty much purely through the back issues. I didn't buy current comics until the mid-2000s again. I now split my time between reading trade paperbacks and reading digital comics because yay tablets. I got my first tablet in 2014, I want to say, and have been reading digital comics pretty heavily ever since. There was a house fire at our previous residence back in 2011, and that was okay, can't afford to buy comics anymore. I'm going to need to spend all my money on recovering from this house fire for the foreseeable future. And so that was pretty much the last time I regularly bought issues off a stand. Although I did go in belatedly several weeks late and get Action Comics 1000 and picked up the occasional other issue. Almost entirely I've been buying trade paperbacks. Some from in-stock trades, a lot of them from Ollie's started having stupid sales on some trade paperbacks, and others were just reasonably priced, but some of them were just stupidly low prices. So I would go there every once in a while and spend way too much money on new trade paperbacks, things like that.
It's too bad you're not on a Fire and Water podcast. That would have been a pretty great blurb for their sponsor.
We can just go to the A's and start with Ariel.
That's an excellent place to start. Paul Smith art. I love Paul Smith. What do you think about her representation here?
From all my comic reading, I never really saw her in this phase. By comic reading, I mean as a kid. When I actually knew her, she was always Shadowcat to me. And she was in a dark blue, light blue costume that I just loved. And it was one of my early favorite characters that I came across. And then once I got a little bit older, one of my earliest, if not my earliest crushes, just such a cutie. Yay, Kitty Pryde. As I got a little more advanced and widespread in my reading, I was oh wait, she wasn't always called Shadowcat. Ariel or Sprite? I didn't even know about. I have not read those comics yet. I'm almost to where the X-Men starts up again in my semi-complete Marvel read-through, but I have not gotten there yet. And then, of course, it's going to be like 35 issues or so until she appears. I'm looking forward to it. This costume, like I say, is not one I'm familiar with from reading her adventures, but it's super cute. The way it's kind of like a little bit baggy, but a little bit tight in like in different places I really like it. I like the high boots.
One thing that I think maybe got lost with this character over the years after the Shadowcat period is they did such a great job of allowing her to have to figure out her identity. All those different code names she went through, a lot of different costumes, many of them deeply embarrassing costumes, which is exactly the sort of thing you would go through in your adolescence. We all go through that, where you're trying on different personas, trying to figure out who you are by trying different things. And I thought they did such a great job of representing that. But because from basically the mid-80s onwards, she was sort of crystallized as to who she was. I think that's why you needed to have Jubilees and Gen X kids down the line, because once she knew who she was, the people who came in reading her after the fact didn't get to have that experience with her of her figuring out who she was through these different costumes and identities.
That makes sense. Speaking about the different costumes and identities, that kind of reminds me, don't know if we were even covering him at all, but Hank Pym was one of my earliest favorite Avengers because of how many different personalities and code names / power sets he's had over the years. I don't know. I always appreciated those characters who like go through lots of different phases. Basically, the Power Pack crossover with Uncanny X-Men was what introduced me to her. I think the first time I started encountering him is through the Morlock situation where Kitty Pryde and Nightcrawler are going through the sewer. The kids are like sneaking around through the sewer or something. I don't remember exactly how it is, but they like come across them. At least that's my memory of the situation. It has been a minute since I've read those comics. Then whenever they had the crossover right out during that storyline of like actually appearing in X-Men and stuff, I started collecting it from that issue and going forward until my mom made me sell all my comics. The only other thing I can think of really is I think it's after this era, but Lockheed. I love Lockheed and her relationship with Lockheed and just such a cute little dragon.
I never read the comics, or at least in first run, I didn't read the comics while she was Ariel. I don't think she was in this particular costume or by that particular name for very long. I was around before the Shadowcat days, and yeah, Kitty Pryde was definitely my first comic book girlfriend for sure. She's one of the reasons why I ended up picking up Uncanny X-Men, at least one of the two reasons why I picked up Kitty Pryde and Wolverine. And for me, she'll always be Shadowcat, but I don't know if anybody's ever drawn her as well as Paul Smith drew her. She's so beautiful, she's so graceful, but she also has that innocence. She's, for me, perfectly represented by Paul Smith, and so it makes me happy to see this drawing, even though, again, this is not a costume or a version of the character that I'm terribly familiar with.
Indeed. I've always been one of those words more than art kind of people when it comes to comics. Like sometimes people will wax episodic about like how they could easily tell that this was Kurt Schaffenberg or like Wayne Boring or various things like that when like talking about their versions of Superman. And I'm like, nope. I mean, it looks like Superman. I can tell the different artists drew very different ones, but the ones that are vaguely similar, I would not be able to tell that they were different artists. I'm just not, that's not the way my brain works really. So I don't remember who drew the iconic versions of Shadowcat that I'm familiar with, but this version is certainly really nice looking here in the static photo for Hatmu. Of all of the Kitty Pryde comics that I've read, she has looked cute under multiple different artists, I guess is a good way of saying it.
And you mentioned too, again, and this will be an ongoing theme with Ohatmu, is the static nature. But I think the great job is done here by Smith of showing the personality, the little wave, the kind of being back on the one hill while the hand behind her back. You get a real sense of her personality, even though she's not necessarily doing anything particularly overt. All those little tells are there to let you know what kind of person this is just based on this single image.
Totally. It really does have more personality than entry that'll come later where we just talked about Darkstar, where she's just kind of standing there. Like you say, she's projecting personality through her hand gestures and things. But as far as pictures go, the one at the bottom is a little bit like, wait, why do they pick that one picture? It's pretty obvious she's just in her underwear and you can't even see what she's wearing on top because she's phasing through a wall. 15-year-old girl at that point, 14-year-old girl in her underwear, whatever.
It's definitely an unfortunate and very odd choice. I wish they hadn't gone that way.
The danger has passed. You are safe now.
Who are you? What are you?
I have traveled across dimensions of space to find you. My name is ARKON, ruler of Polemicus. My planet is dying. You, mistress of the elements, can save us.
You created this chaos.
It is but a hint of the misery that afflicts my planet. With every second, Polemicus comes closer to extinction.
How could you endanger all of these people just to get to me? That is barbarous.
My people depend on me. I must be prepared to do anything to save them.
Hi, my name is Caroline Lowe. I'm a huge comic book fan, both Marvel and DC, and I'm just a nerd working hard to become a voice actor.
We can move on to ARKON.
Okay.
What is your familiarity with this fellow? Have you read him in any comics in the past?
Mostly in the Weird World arc, like the Battle World and the Weird World arc.
So the recent Secret Wars, relatively recent Secret Wars crossover then.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about him there.
ARKON is like ARKON the Magnificent. He comes from this world, I never know if I pronounce this right, called Polemarchus, that glorifies warfare. It's almost like, imagine the Amazon world where everyone's a warrior and they do have their own sciences. And outside of this world, you can see these light rings that surround it. And those rings are essential to Polemarchus. For some reason, scientists there believe, they determined that atomic explosion somehow kind of rekindled the power rings for about a good year if there's at least one explosion on Earth. So ARKON, being the most celebrated warrior of their world, he had gotten into contact with Scarlet Witch, and he tricked her into saying a spell that could transport him to Earth, where he kidnapped Scarlet Witch because, he fell in love with her. He's like, I want to marry you. And she's like, no, thank you. And he also kidnapped a couple of scientists, too, and then they went back to his world, Polemarchus, where they were working on this atomic device thing that right before he could activate it, Scarlet Witch managed to get the Avengers to come to Polemarchus, and, they did get out for a little while, but Iron Man and Thor, they figured out how to make like an artificial device that would simulate atomic activity, that would keep their power rings good and running. And this is one part that I do like about ARKON, like when there is a conflict and a conflict is clearly solved, he doesn't just insist that he should be the winner. He always says, okay, the conflict is gone, everything is solved, you guys can go home, I can go home. So that's what he does. In Weird World, we all know a bunch of worlds got kind of meshed into one really big Weird World, and he just wants to find his home. He has no idea what's going on. The only goal that he has in mind is home. I gotta find my home. I gotta go home. So he just keeps searching and searching. He even comes across these people from a plane crash, and he does save them, but he's still just agonizing over finding his home world, Polemarchus. And he even reaches the end of the Weird World where it's like this edge, and he is just completely given up, and he actually falls from the edge and is attacked by another character called Morgan Le Fay, where he is saved by, I cannot recall, but at right before he was saved by the other character, he got a glimpse of the upside down of Weird World, and he saw his home world, and he just got so happy. That's the only thing that mattered to him. I felt really bad for him in the Weird World, because he was just going through so much conflict with himself.
We have so many characters in comics that are so driven. They have this thirst for justice or this quest for revenge. It's all going to be this epic scale. And it sounds like he's, for the most part, he's a very capable individual, but just wants to live his life, and all this stuff just keeps going his way.
He loves his home. He loves his world. He loves his planet. He just wants to help it. At one point, the artificial device, it didn't really seem like it was working that well for him, so he wanted to make it better. But yeah, he did end up screwing it over and causing a whole other mess. That's just another story later, but most of his end goals are for his home and his people. I think that's kind of a little bit noble in some ways or another.
And what do you think of the entry art by Bob Budiansky?
It kind of looks like a He-Man or Conan era type of design. He got this really buff guy with only basically a loincloth, maybe a cool hat, and some shoes, and a shield, and some weaponry at his side. But it's a little bit laughable.
Pretty sure I'd play with that action figure back in the day.
Yeah.
So anything else on ARKON?
He does have these kind of cool lightning bolt-ish weapons. The golden ones, they have the ability to transport him to other worlds. The red ones, they cause a big explosion, but the black ones cause an even really bigger explosion. And they're solid right up until the point they hit the target, and it just kind of melds into this energy blast. And I think that's kind of cool.
It's always fun when you have something clearly coded like that. I think that's something that kids especially respond to, is like, I know what these ones do versus what this one does.
I almost forgot. There's this one point, I cannot remember for the life of me why, but there was this Hollywood movie going on. It was actually starring the character of ARKON, and the character Wonder Man got it, and it just seemed like such a stupid storyline where ARKON just basically went over to Earth in Hollywood and he just smacked Wonder Man around saying, hey, yeah.
Very random.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of those things where somebody had the idea and maybe didn't know quite how to execute it. Just like, okay, well.
Yeah, they had something there, but they just didn't know what to do with it.
Yeah, aside from the lightning bolts, I think that hat is probably the most distinctive thing. If I did have that action figure, I'm pretty sure the flappy thing would have broken off on me.
Mm-hmm. It was very sharp.
The official listeners of the Marvel Handbook podcast are 20th Century Geek Podcast, The 108th Sage, Adriano, Always Second, Andre 79 Oliveira, Dr. And, Between the Pages, Brian Gooney, Brian Mulvey, Brian Burnt, Caroline Wells, Chris at Bat Books for Beginners, Chris Dunford, Christopher Bush, Collected Edition, Daniel French, Fishbone as Sound Design, who tweeted a hot dog whip gif, Debash, Delvin, Derek William Crabb of Fanholes Podcast and History of Comics on Film, Doc Strange, Dr. G, Nerdologist, Dirk Ashton, who tweeted a thank you cat gif, Ed Moore, Eric Borden, Fiendish Fitz, FSD Records, Gene Hendricks of the Hammer Strikes, Random Geeky Stuff, Iowa's Joe Crawford, Jax Webb, Jeffrey Brown, Jennifer DeRoss, Carl Ottersberg, who tweeted humble thanks, Keith G. Baker, Kenny Crowley Jr., Law Dog, RPG Historian, Marvel Universe Online, Max Traver, Mike It Send Aliens to Me, who wrote I feel like there is a does backlash nay joke in here somewhere. Anyway, really excited to hear this. Keep up the great work. Luke J. Canetti of Earth Destruction Directive added, I can only imagine Blizzard, Boomerang, Beetle, etc. taunting him mercilessly with that # team. Odell Abner Dracula, who wrote Blacklash's whip looks like a fine German rapidograph, relatively geeky. Randy Caldwell, Resurrections, an Adam Warlick and Thanos podcast. Richard G. Ryan Daly, Sean Coleman, Sean Moret, who wrote Hell Yeah, Can't Wait to Hear This, Siskoid, Stimped 5000, Talk Nerdy to Me, Hobby Dobie Shop, and Wonder Woman, Warrior for Peace podcast.
All characters and concepts appearing in the official handbook of the Marvel Universe and the distinct likenesses thereof are the trademark and copyright of Marvel Entertainment, LLC, a subsidiary of the Walt Disney Company. This has been a not-for-profit fan production from Rolled Spine Podcasts, with any copyrighted materials presented herein presumed covered under fair use, with no infringement intended.